Hi painters, welcome back to my studio. The last time we were here we talked about materials, we talked about brushes, paints, canvas, mediums and cleaners, and then we talked about the results of what brushes do to different paints. So today we're going to be discussing subject matter. Seems to be a very difficult thing for some of my students to figure out what it is they want to paint. Oh, what am I going to paint? They get that blank canvas, panic, and they don't have a clue as to what they want to do. So, you got a vast array of subject matter when you're painting. You can do still lifes, you can do pets and wildlife, animals, you can do figurative work, from models. You can do seascapes, cityscapes, landscapes, or abstract, sky's the limit. So I would say whatever motivates you, whatever appeals to you, stimulates you, turns you on, that's the kind of thing that you want to paint. For me, it's always been the landscape. I was born and raised in Canada and surrounded by a lot of nature, got very interested in doing nature and painting nature from a very early age. So I've kept that love, and that's my passion. That's what I love to do. But you've got to determine what it is that you like to do and pursue that, because it's too difficult to try to do everything. It's hard to be a good figurative artist, a good landscape, a good seascape, one who does cityscapes well. You sort of have to specialize in one area to become adept and very good at it. Not that you can't try these other areas and see what you like, but eventually it's better to sort of focus on one area so that you can be perfected in that specific area. So to show you some of the things that I like to paint, we'll start here. I'm in California, so I like to paint California scenes, which are mostly golden hills with a lot of oak trees, maybe some eucalyptus trees, poplars. This is a late evening hayfield, and I like to do dramatic clouds. So I think the combination of the California hill late afternoon, evening scene with a dramatic cloud is very, very dramatic, very stimulating, and it's also a very good seller, which doesn't hurt. I also do it in the springtime where there are more of the green in the hills, and then I add poppies, wildflowers to add some color. I started doing fall scenes about 15 years ago, and they've become probably the most popular thing I do. A lot of color, a lot of excitement and drama, and people love to be invited to walk down the roads, feel the crunch of the leaves under their feet, and it's something that has been very popular for me to do, and I like doing it because of the very vivid colors you get to use. So California hills, fall scenes. Another subject I like very much to do is gardens, and here's an example of one of the gardens I did from an English. It's a combination of several different English gardens, and again I've used a lot of different sources and put them together in a composition so that there's a lot of color going on and interest. You're brought into the scene through these lines which draw your eye to this area, and a lot of nice soft color going on with the gardens. So I like the serenity and the stillness and the color and the beauty that you find in gardens. So you've got to find out what it is that you like to do and pursue that. I would recommend that you paint locally. If you're doing work that you know very well and you're familiar with, you tend to do a better job. You're familiar with the lay of the land and the atmospheric conditions that you're dealing with, and you can paint them realistically and do a good job. If you try to do something you're not familiar with, it's a little bit more difficult. You don't know, the subject matter quite as well. So know your subject well so that you can convey it and paint it well. What I thought we'd do is we've talked about materials and paints, and I thought we'd get started on a demo. So I'm going to do one of the things which I enjoy doing a lot, which is California Hills. And I've put together 2 photos that I took. One is some foothills in the spring with a large oak tree on the right, some rolling hills. And I've sandwiched it together with a poppy field. There's poppies and lupins here, which I think would add color into this sloping field. So putting 2 photos together is something I do quite a bit of. And if it's not the way you want it, you can just create it the way you want it. You don't have to copy your photo just the way it is. So we'll put that up there, and we'll get started. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see what the heck I'm doing. And we'll start with a filbert, kind of a fluffy bristle filbert, which will allow me to paint in the lines that I need to do. So we start off on the canvas, which has been already prepped. We did that in the first episode. And we'll get a color which is sort of a blue-green. And I'm going to go in here and put the slope. We want to start with sort of a line drawing and get the basic lines of the structures that we're doing. So this is the slope of the hill. Little trees right in here. Coming over to this large oak tree here, which will sort of balance this large oak tree here. The hills behind it, like this, rolling over here. And then in the very background, these hills back in here. And as we go back further into the landscape, we get lighter and bluer. The further we get away, everything starts to cool down and get much bluer and cooler. So you can see these mountains way back in here are very blue and very light. So the value of those has to be quite light and blue way back in here. You can make those a little bigger, make them a little more dramatic. And the rest is going to be sky. So we don't need to worry about that until later. I usually do my skies after I've done the landscape. This is a fairly simple thing to do. Not a lot of complicated buildings. So we can start blocking it out fairly quickly. Once we get our lines drawn, we can start putting the paint down close to what the color should be. Doesn't have to be exact. I'm mixing yellow ochre here with a little bit of cerulean blue to make it a little bit greener, and white. So it's very light, mostly ochre and blue. The difficult thing here is to distinguish all of these hills. So as they go further back, they get a little bit lighter. So we add a little bit more white, a little bit more blue, and then as we get closer, we add a little more yellow, so it gets warmer. So the way we can distinguish this hill from this hill is by adding more blue to it, making it a little bit lighter. And then where these two meet, we will do a fairly warm, which means more yellow, right on the edge. So now we can see the difference between this hill and that hill. See that? And then back in these hills, it's between this color and the far ground, the far hill here. So it's got trees on it, so it's a little bit darker. When you squint down, it becomes mostly blue. So we're going to add, again, more cerulean blue. So this is going to be a little bit darker because it's different material. It's trees instead of hills. So the trees are going to be darker, and there'll be a difference between this hill and this hill, mainly in warmth, in temperature. So we'll put the base color down, then we'll go in with the lighter color where the hills are. Put that down there. At this point, the main thing you want to do is create your layers of depth. And now that I've laid that down, I realize that this one is still a little too dark. So I'm going to add a little more white to that. Lighten that value up a little bit more. It's okay to darken it where it meets the sky, but not where it meets the next layer. Okay. Then we continue on with this hill, which is a little bit, it's in shadow, but I don't think I'll put it in shadow. I'll put it in sunlight. Start with blue, mix in a little more yellow ochre. Maybe a touch of the cadmium yellow, because I want it to be a little warmer. And away we go. Add a little more white to that. A little too hot. Just scumble it on there. You're not trying for detail at this point. You're just trying to get the paint on and the values right. The rest is mostly tree, so we'll leave the hill color right here. Make sure we can see the difference between this hill, that hill, and all the rest. They've got to go back in a progression to create that sense of depth. And then the foreground hill, warmer still. So we're just adding more yellow. So here you want it quite warm. So we're adding more yellow still. And this is the warmest area, is their foreground here. So this can be quite a bit of yellow. Except under the tree where it's going to be shadowed, there you want to have more blue. And down right in here, we want to have a little more ochre, maybe a touch of Indian red to warm it up a little. Down in here. just putting a base coat on, which we paint over. And these bristle brushes are good for scrubbing because they're very durable. So it doesn't hurt them to squish them and smash them and scrub them. They're sort of the workhorse brush. We talked about the paints we used last time, so I'm using the yellows and the blues, which is cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, and cerulean blue, because it's a very light blue. You don't want to go too dark. Okay, we got most of this covered now. So we want to go a little darker on the blue now and create that shadow. So we're using Prussian blue, again the yellow ochre, add a little bit of Indian red, and put that shadow right along here, gradually getting smaller, and then feather it a little bit. Give it sort of a grassy effect. Got a little too much of it on there. And if you want to soften that edge, you can just use the paper towel and blend the two together. The towel will take some of the paint off and blend it with what's above it and below it. There, got a nice soft shadow. And then while you've got that dark color, you can add the areas where you want to put the poppies, because there's always a dark foliage under where the poppies will be. So you make your designs, and I think we'll have a little path going through here to sort of invite the viewer in. So let's put most of the poppies on the left, and we'll have a path going in and then around. Get a little lighter as we go back, a little bit smaller. Okay, the path, we'll use white and yellow ochre. And we'll put the path coming in this way on a little diagonal. And then turn, jog a little bit, and go back into the hill and around the hill down into the valley. And this is something you just have to create and feel good about. I like to have a lot of roads or paths going into my composition. It sort of invites the viewer into your painting, and they're very easy to do. People like them. They like to go down roads. They like to go down paths. But this invites the viewer to wander through the flowers down into the valley. So now we're going to do the trees. And let's do the same colors. We're using just the Prussian blue, which is very dark, and the yellow ochre, adding a little bit of Indian red to take the blueness out of it, make it a little warmer. And Start down here. Actually, the trees pretty much go all the way along here, don't they? Very light touch. Another large tree right here. And then a bigger tree right there. All using the same brush. Let's dip it down just a little bit where the path goes around. Happy little trees. We're painting happy trees. Okay, once we got some trees on the hill here. Some right up in here. We don't have to do as many as there are in the photo. I'd like some right here though, because this distinguishes this hill from that hill. Separates the one from the other. So let's put them here, going up the top of the hill like this. Again, at this stage, you just want to rough out. Everything is just rough. So you want to get your basic shapes in and your basic values done correctly so that they're not too dark or too light. Let's see, this goes all the way over here. And that's good because it outlines this hill. So we'll bring the trees all the way over there. Make them sort of random so they're not all in a line. And the last thing to do will be the tree. And we're going to bring a little more of the Indian red into the dark blue to make a brown. You can make brown with Prussian blue and Indian red. So we want this about, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the way in. So we want it right about here. And I'm going to switch brushes because this is a little bit too fluffy of a brush to do the tree limbs, which we want to do at this stage of the game. Right now I'm using another filbert, but it's a sharper filbert. It's got a knife edge, so I can do very thin lines. And it's an oak tree, so we want to make it kind of gnarly and twisted. Could be a little darker. Okay, now we're going to add the foliage, which is a little more cerulean blue into it and yellow ochre. Make it a little greener. Again, some Indian red. And just tap this color in. And I'm going to go back, I think, to the bigger brush, since we're running out of time, and this will work a little faster. This tree is going to be a little bigger than the one in the photo. Take up a little bit more room. I like the way it sort of weeps down into this area. Kind of comes down in a sloping way. And we'll do another workshop on trees a little later and talk about the different varieties of trees and how to create the leaf patterns in them. But this is an oak, so it's done in bunches, in little arcs like this, the way they grow, with some gnarly branches holding them up. So, how's it coming? Let's bring it down to about here. Again, we just want to rough out the shapes. Let's bring it down a little over the hill so we know that it's in front of the hill. And we can alter that shape as we want to next time. We just want to block out, at this point, the main shapes. And the next step after this is to go in and do the sky. We'll do the clouds first, and then we'll do the sky behind it. And you want to highlight the top of the dark mass like this. Just to give a suggestion of where the light's coming from, which is the right. And we'll do it a little bit more detail next time. Next week. Yeah. Got to leave something for next week. Good. So basically you've got your composition down. You know where your poppies and flowers are going to be. Put some right here. You got your path in, your hill down. So all the structures are in place. The rest is just details. So that's the lesson for today. I hope you find subjects that you like and that inspire you, and have a lot of fun painting and finding things that you like to paint. And we will see you next time. So long.